Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes, and I'm sure this episode will be very interesting because we have our world famous speakers from around the world, as well as this uh, topic is based on technology and human identity. So hopefully we will get a very good insight from this industry. We have our world famous speakers, policymaker, Professor Edwards. We have our friends, Mr. Aaron. We have Professor Donalds, Professor David Smith, Mr. James Eid, and Mr. Rob. Thank you for joining today. I want to start from Professor Edward. How do you want to analyze today's topic?
Hi, well, thanks for introducing an interesting topic. We always talk about technology, but part of my own organization's work, the Human Achievement Alliance, is to look at technology not only in terms of public policy, but in terms of culture and in terms of social institutions. Um, and in one sense, this is simply a continuation of a process going on since the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution that has changed the world. Um, but what it means also is that people must have a sort of a firm grasp, you might say, of their own identities, and not let technology rule their identities, but let them rule technology. Now, here in the United States, we're going through a big cultural struggle right now with what's called identity politics. This is frankly a neo-racist dogma that basically says human beings should be identified by accidents of birth. And this goes directly against, for example, the beliefs of the great Martin Luther King, a great civil rights leader in the United States, who said that he had a dream that one day his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that really goes to a principle that we should keep in mind as these new technologies develop around us and as we use them, as we interact with them. We are the agents as individuals of our own lives. We're the captains of our own souls, so to speak. Uh, and this is absolutely crucial that we think of technology as tools that we can use to make marvelous things and do marvelous things, and to keep our identity from not merging with the technology, but using the technology to improve ourselves, to make ourselves better people, to allow us to flourish. My organization is the Human Achievement Alliance, and I like to say that we are all achievers, whether we're nurturing a child to maturity or a business to profitability, whether we're writing a song or a poem or a business plan or a dissertation, whether we're laying the bricks to the building or designing the building or arranging for its finances. We are all achievers. And so we have to take our identity from what we do, from what we make of ourselves. And now, by the way, I'm a strong individualist because, after all, it's your mind that's thinking. We're having a nice discussion here, but every single listener, you're listening to this show and this broadcast with your own mind. You have to make your own evaluations. That doesn't mean that you exclude other people. Quite the opposite. One of the great things about Sharif's shows, if I can say some nice things here, is that we have different perspectives. We have very intelligent panelists. So we all kind of interact. We each not only hopefully teach each other, but we also learn from each other. Okay. But ultimately, the unit, the moral unit, and the acting unit is the individual. And so as we go into this future is so exciting, but we have to basically understand that our identity should be what we make of ourselves, what kind of moral character we cultivate in ourselves, how we realize our dreams, how we make our plans, how we work with others to realize our own dreams based on mutual consent. That is the most important moral principle I think we can have. And so I hope as we move into an age of exponential technology and prosperity, well, the only way we're going to do it, quite frankly, is with the philosophy and the idea of individualism, working with others, cooperative, and be based on mutual consent, and not let the technology, basically rule us. We rule it. We create it. And again, I have to get off a little early, but thank you for a fascinating topic. We need more like this, Sharif. And I look
Thank you.
forward to
Thank you.
hearing the recordings from my friends here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Professor David Smith, how do you want to analyze today's topic?
Very, very fascinating topic. The real thing as I look at this is, like Edward said, our sense of identity is rooted in so many different areas. I know in my early years and in past generations, our sense of identity was primarily an internal sense of identity. It was what our family taught us, what our friends, brothers, sisters, uh, and those that we had close personal contact with. And they did a lot to help put in place our sense of identity. And what has happened, though, with the digitalization, the technology, is increasingly our sense of identity has become external. And the sense of identity being external is pretty wide reaching as you look at some of the differences. I can tell you, even it's impacting me. My part of my sense of identity in a questionnaire I was filling out the other day, it was, well, how many followers do you have on LinkedIn? How many followers do you have on Facebook? How many other places do you reach? And that has become for many their own sense of identity, and how that sense of identity has taken and manifested itself. Some of the other places where we've seen sense of identity dramatically change is when we look at things like information and privacy. Information and privacy has changed our own sense of identity. The real process of learning with the machine learning has given us a traceability of all of our activities. And, even the use of smart watches and others facilitate this traceability of our physical activities and really of our own data, which is part of our sense of our identity. You go back and look at where we're going in healthcare with personalized medicine. It's changing part of our sense of identity as well, too. The genesis that I think we're looking at is when we've changed and we reached out and became a connected global personification versus our more closely held internal personification, that has dramatically changed our sense of identity. And technology is the thing that has made that possible. Yeah, I still remember when I was young, you would get a knock at the door with a telegram when there was a death in the family. You don't see that anymore. Where long distance was expensive and was separate, you don't see that anymore. Where news took a day to reach you, it's immediate today. I was awoken this morning by people telling me, calling and texting me, calling me about the assassination of the Haitian president this morning. And that was immediate, where particularly in a situation like that, it would have taken a day for that to get to us there. And so that changes our identity too. And so technology is a great enabler here, but it has dramatically changed our own sense of our personal identity from internal to more external driven. Sharif, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Professor Rob, how do you want to analyze today's topic? And you are also technology expert. What will be the future actually?
Well, as I look at a digital identity in this technology world, it often is defined, and fact, right now it's being defined far earlier than any identity, at least public identity, has ever been defined before. We're watching real time how kids are being held accountable for things that they may have said 5, 6, 7 years earlier. Now as they're entering the workforce, and the things that you do and you say online are part of that identity. And much like if you had crimes in your past, if you resorted to violence because you were angry, those things can have an impact on who's going to employ you in the future, where you go to school, who you marry. You're forming a digital identity now pretty much from the moment you put your hands on the keyboard. Well, I should say it's probably being formed even before you, as soon as your parents start talking to you and using your name, talking about you using your name. Your identity is being formed on the internet, and managing that identity now becomes an increasingly large problem. Because now you try to enter the workforce in your early 20s or late teens, and all these things come up in a review, and you have to defend them. And the sad thing is, as we move increasingly to computers vetting candidates, you may never get a chance to defend what it is you did. Those things will have an impact on whether you actually get an interview, let alone eventually get hired. So it's incredibly important now to develop a sense of self, digital self, if you will, very early on, and make sure you're curating your image to be consistent with the person that you want to be, not necessarily the person that you are. In fact, I was talking the other day with somebody about, what do you want to do during your summer vacation? And maybe kind of discover what your digital identity should be. How do you want the world to view you? And begin building that image. I'm successful largely because I got real early that I needed to manage my own image and separate that image from the companies I work for, so that I could market my image myself and do what I wanted to do, as opposed to being an employee the rest of my life. And it made a huge difference. And so recognize that your digital identity is how people will view you at large. It may have nothing to do with who you are, how you think. It simply has to do with how people perceive you. And perception is 100% of reality. How somebody sees you is how they see you. It has, and it can have nothing to do with the way you really are. And really thinking through that, and thinking about how it is you want to be perceived and what you want your future life to be like now, before you've done a lot of damage to that future, is going to be important to assuring that future going forward. I'll leave that opening there. There's another aspect to this, and that's digital immortality, and the ability to take that digital identity and carry it forward even after your death. But I'll leave that to the next round. Thank
you, Professor Rob. Professor Donald, how do you want to analyze today's topic?
Yeah. Well, I think that we need to kind of take a step back and look at what identity is. I'm sorry that so early in the morning my coffee hasn't even hit in, because I know Edward. Sorry, I'm sorry that Edward is gone, because he said a few things that are idiosyncratic. So I do want to say that identity politics is defined as, I got it here somewhere. Well, it's basically when somebody identifies with their group to the exclusion of the greater society. So it doesn't have anything to do with systematic racism or anything like that. It's when somebody decides, I'm a Trump fan more than I'm a whatever, or I'm an African American more than I'm whatever, but that's no big deal in a way, because there's lots of versions of what identity can mean. There's social identity, there's the identity that you have when you're thinking about yourself, there's the identity that you have with others. And I really like what David said, but I sort of like to think of the question, it's rhetorical and maybe David would answer it, is why are your family and friends and the people close to you, not external. They're external too. And the stories that you get so that you can use to build your identity. When you ask yourself the question, who am I? You have to have some answer to that question. And where do those answers come from? Well, they're from your language, from your experience, from your culture, from everything and perhaps your own internal feeling networks. So identity is very much external. I know when we were talking about, Rob was just talking about different things that you have that help build your identity. In Los Angeles, often when you meet people, say you go to a meetup, you ask them questions like, what do you do? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And in Los Angeles, like the second or third question is always, what kind of car do you drive? And it's part of who you are to yourself and to others is the kind of car you drive. And so where does that come from? That's not something that just you're born with. It's not in your genes or something like that. It's definitely an external reality. And if you get a better car, you feel better about yourself. You have higher status. I mean, it makes an incredible difference. In sociology, in fact, I was a co-author of a book called Identity and Control, which is, I'm proud to say is actually a very, very, very highly regarded sociology book. And it's not because of me. It's because I was very, 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 very minor tag-on author to a very famous sociologist. It doesn't have anything to do with me, really. But I did have to understand the book, which was significant in itself. It took me about a year. And but the point is Harrison White and Charles Tilly and the sociologists, they look at identity as a location in social space, basically, that we separate from everything else and we identify it. So a soccer game has an identity because it's different than other things. A car has an identity. So identity is a social thing. It's not an individual thing. Even when you're talking about yourself, you're as I just pointed out, you're using the information and the possibilities that came from you, from your language, from your culture, from everything around you. You're creating a narrative about yourself, and that narrative about yourself is when you think of yourself, who am I? And you answer those questions. So I really wish Edward is here, because Edward, when he's saying that it's individuals collaborating with society, it's really the other way around. Society creates us as individuals, and we're not separate. And it doesn't make any sense, because we can't have our own language, we can't have our own culture, and so on like that. So I want to say one more thing and let others talk, and I'll talk about this more later. I want to ask the question, is what is a mind? Because we started out with the idea of minds. And sometimes people futurists or whatever, talk about the idea of uploading your mind. But where is your mind in your brain? I mean, isn't it got to be in your brain? Where is it? We think of the mind as the part of ourselves that makes choices and accesses memory, but our brain is doing a whole heck of a lot more, because we don't control our vision. We can control our breathing and indirectly our heartbeat, but we can't control our blood pressure with our minds. All of these things work together, and ultimately you can't really separate what you do in your actions in the world from your body. From all of those unconscious things that are going on are also part of you and what you are. And so nowadays, the most common theories in the philosophy of mind and philosophy of neuroscience, actually they don't call it philosophy of mind anymore, but the philosophies of neuroscience is that our brains are prediction machines. And we're basically doing a top-down thing where we guess at what's going on. In other words, basically we're living in a hallucination. And that hallucination is updated by sensory information. And what we get is input. We're connected to the chair we're sitting on, and we're connected to everything around us. And as technology, and we're connected to technology. So in a way, writing down on a piece of paper and adding up numbers, well, arithmetic is a technology. And then we use a calculator instead, and then we use our watches, and then we use Siri or whatever, and we can do these things. But all of those are really part of our minds because they help us make decisions. They do all the things that we think that minds do. I'll talk about this more later, but the involvement of technology is that it's changing the narratives about who we are, expanding who we are, and basically adding more possibilities. And as I'll talk about it more later and let other people talk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jamsid.
Thank you, Sharif, for the opportunity to talk about something that's extremely important, as everybody so far has indicated. This isn't talked about enough, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss it. And I'm going to take some issue with some of the things that Edward said, and but it's nothing I haven't said to his face before. He and I have been on shows before. We've shared our views many times, so he could anticipate some of the things I'm about to say. And I want to tell the youth out there that if you're listening to this show, pay attention to what Rob told you. Not what I'm about to tell you as much. You might want to listen to what I told you, but take charge of your digital identity. Take control over your life. And there's a digital component to it now that you must manage. Just as you have to be your own advocate or someone has to advocate for you in the health system, it's just part of reality now. You've got to be your own advocate, manage your own identity. And to go back to what I'm going to tell you now, which is a little bit different, is that I also strongly believe in an individual identity, and a little bit different than the way that Edward does. I'll tell you about, I was working with this very attractive woman, and she told me, I can get you to do anything I want. And I thought, and so of course my back goes up, and I said, oh, yeah, sure. Or I said something to that effect. And she said, yeah, I just have to tell you, you can't do it. And I just started laughing because, yeah, that's the way to control me, is tell me I can't do it. I grew up in the Vietnam era. And, we were anti-authoritarians, and we were saying, you can't tell us what to do. And so that was the way I grew up, with the idea that I am going to take charge not only of myself, but of my society. Well, gradually as you age, you learn different things. You learn about cooperation, and that it requires a team to get more done than any individual can. And so then you learn that, authority isn't necessarily an enemy. It's how you're working with it and how it's working with you. And my sense of identity now is I don't care. And this is, again, pay attention to Rob, not to me, but I don't care what others' perception of me is. I think it's none of my business what you think of me. I simply don't care. And the idea here is to trust yourself, to look inwards, knowing your identity. Although we have to think of these external things, as Rob pointed out, but the way to know yourself, it's an inside job. It's introspection. And it's a process of finding out what your core values are. And I think you need to mental health, your physical health, and your spiritual well-being. And, I already hear minds closing when I talk about a spiritual path, a spiritual way of living. But these same people who are closed-minded to that kind of thinking, believe in an invisible hand that will shape the market forces. So, you know, it's all in your perspective. And I do believe that I find what I value, what I treasure in my life is the connection to other life. And that's plants, that's trees, that's people. I'm connected to people. And guess what? It doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter what color your skin is. You're people, I'm connected to you. And I find it through an inside process of finding a core being that, holy cow, this core being is just about the same in all of us. And that's what's connected. Not what we do, not what language we speak, not where we live. Those can be disconnected. But you find your own identity and you find that the sum of all of our identity, the whole, is greater than the sum of the parts. If we think as one species, one life form, we are so much better than if we think of just ourselves. The self-orientation, which our society reinforces every single day of my life, is less than if we work together. We think of each other as all members of the same family. And we tap into some other greater potential. And I'm not going to be able to spell it out what it is, but it's there. I've seen it. It's real. And if you work together in that spirit, you accomplish so much more than if you have various individuals pursuing their own selfish interests. Thank you again, Sharif. It's a great show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Aaron, how are you and how do you want to analyze to this topic?
Wow. Honestly, I don't know where to start after all of this discourse so far. It's been just absolutely brilliant and enlightening and very enlightening. You know, but I guess I should start with the basics because we kind of got into identity and all that stuff, and that's incredibly important. But, you know, you got to think about the fundamentals of the question at hand, you know, tech and humanity and maintaining your humanity in this tech-drenched world. Well, what is humanity? You know, on the highest end, you know, it's what, you know, James was talking about. And on the lowest end, it can be pretty bad. It is the Vietnam War that James also talked about. So in terms of preserving our humanity through technology, what is it that we're exactly wanting to preserve? And you've got to take that on an individual level and think about what it is that you can be doing to change that within yourself and within your society around for the better. Because as we do come into this world of technological marvels, there's also a lot of room for technological horrors. And those have been briefly discussed here in the show, and they've been broadly discussed in all manner of sci-fi, news stories, whatever have you, especially as it pertains to life extension, AI, personal augmentation through genetic engineering. There's been just volumes upon volumes of discourse on how that can go badly if we nurture the negative aspects of our humanity. And I do think that does have a lot to do with your identity and figuring out what, obviously you like good things. As a human being, you like good things, right? Nobody actually likes bad things. So it's really about manifesting yourself, which is a lot of what Rob was talking about, was taking control of your identity digitally as it pertains to your identity digitally. And that is just such an important, please, my goodness, to all the young listeners out there, please listen to what Rob has said. Take care of your image online. Really try to manicure and manifest that, because manifesting your identity has always been an integral part of surviving as a social organism, which we are social organisms. We are social creatures. You know, and being able to create establish an identity, then create it, and then be able to manifest it in the outward world while other people are actively perceiving you, and they may not perceive you how you want to be perceived. And a lot of that has to do with your ability to convey yourself. And a lot of that is based on your solidity of your identity itself. So a lot of the times the reason why people have such a difficult time manifesting themselves in the society is that they don't really know who they are. And unfortunately, this takes it to more of a philosophical end, you know, where you don't really have numbers and data to guide you here. And that's where you really have to look at history to draw examples, you know, of people who thought they were doing the right thing and it ended up going horribly. And ultimately, that's how I think we're going to be able to preserve our humanity coming into this technological era, because we are creating an entirely new life form, an entirely new layer to life here on Earth. We are a part of life on Earth, an extension of life on Earth, and all of life on Earth is very codependent. And this, the organism that we're creating, being technology, hasn't necessarily impacted the organism of life on Earth very well so far. So we have to take more considerations as to, okay, why not use, you know, AI to predict just basic weather patterns, you know, so that we can plan around agriculture better, and, you know, we can navigate around, you know, endangered sections, and I know this is all very kind of a loose framework of a thought at best, but what the real point here is that as we move forward to maintain our humanity, we have to look to our past, we have to look at ourselves, we have to look at society as a whole and think of how we can make everything symbiotic, so that we can continue to move forward with human progress, so that we can continue to unify, and so that our future will be composed of the best parts of humanity and not the worst parts. So sorry for my caffeine-fueled little tangent there, but those are just my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Professor Rob, like very interesting thought actually, engaging with these discussions. I love to learn more, especially when we have a lot of challenging situation right now in the COVID-19 situation. There are a lot of challenge. Even in South Asia, situation is very bad. Malaysia also, COVID not in controls. On the other hand, technologically, the technology improve a lot. What will be the future? And beside that, when we discuss about human identity, what do you think about our healthcare systems and how we can improve? Because there is a one part of the world, let's say developed nations, like you are from USA, all of the modern science, engineering, and technology improve in USA or Germany and other part of the world. On the other hand, there are many nations and there are billions of people still, they need to improve a lot. How we can make a proper balance?
Okay, that was a fairly convoluted question. I think the answer is 42. So looking at the mess we're in with regard to, well, let's try to parse some of this stuff. With regard to the COVID-19, our futures are probably going to be at least partially defined by pandemics and breakouts. We've been talking about the problems that created this one for a while. How it relates to identity really comes down to how you're manipulated. Part of understanding your identity is understanding how people manipulate you and then building up defenses against that manipulation. It's part of the structured training that goes into the career path of an analyst, because what it does is introduces bias. And once you introduce bias in an analyst, we're pretty much done. You can't trust what it is that we come up with, because we've been compromised. And if we don't know we've been compromised, and by the way, every analyst is compromised, but if we don't know we've been compromised, we can't mitigate it. And so part of our training is first to understand how we can be manipulated, to talk about how we can be manipulated, and then talk about how those efforts can be mitigated, so that our advice and counsel is unbiased. And if you can't do that, then you really can't play with the big boys in my field. And so that's been very helpful in understanding that as I built my own career. But it's very important as we walk through the pandemic and the problems we got with the pandemic. I mean, I imagine in all parts of the world, we've got people that are called vaccine deniers, and folks that will not take a vaccine because in some cases they think it's got magnetic particles or a microprocessor developed by Bill Gates, or just plug something in here and figure it's going to work. I'm kind of surprised nobody came up with a mythical answer where little fairies are running around in our bloodstream with their wands, turning us into something else, because it's about as logical as the rest of this stuff is. But the end result is it's all designed to manipulate, and certain groups of people can be manipulated by certain kinds of messages, and conspiracy theories and the evil of whatever it is, big government, secret military, industrial organizations, what I mean is you can pick something and drive aliens, space alien, I don't know. So at the end, once you understand where the points are that people can get you to conform to what it is they want you to do, the better able you are to define yourself and operate independently. It's troubling to me consistently how people almost all over the world are motivated to act against their own self-interest. It seems to me that's should be an easy problem to overcome, but it's not, because if you don't first understand what your self-interest is, you can't defend against it. What things do you stand for? What things are important to you? What is it that gets you up in the morning and has you excited about the day ahead? That these are all things that all of us should be able to write off the top of our heads, but very often we can't. Our initial morals, our initial identity is largely defined by our parents and our friends early in life, and we have very little control over any of that. But as we become adults, we do have the ability to go back and retrospectively figure out how our lives, how our personalities were molded by the things that we've heard, and so much of what we hear is false information. There was a show I was watching the other day about how just the kind of screwy stuff that's out there. And part of it was a CEO that believed that the sound a fly made comes from its mouth. Basically, flies are running around his head singing in a buzzing fashion. And that's what he believed, never challenged it once. That's pretty benign. But I know when I was in my mid-20s and I was finally getting the heck away from my family, my grandmother sat me down and said, make sure you never get bitten by a black man. And I'm like completely from left field. Now, to give you an idea, my grandmother, she had a master's degree out of Berkeley. She's an ex-politician, very well educated. And yet in her, way back when she was a child, her father told her a story about somebody that was bitten by a person of color, and it got infected. Now, I can kind of see how the story came out, because human mouths are pretty dirty, and regardless, I've been bit by a human when I was a child. That didn't want to heal forever. So I kind of get how somebody might have come to that conclusion. But her entire life, she believed that black people had venom, that much like a snake has venom, and it made them very dangerous. And that impacted her entire worldview of people of color, and it was a wrong fact. And in my mid-20s, I'm looking at her and going, okay, what did somebody steal her brain? Did aliens come in and possess? I mean, like, where did this come from? I mean, I was so nonplussed when she made the comment. I just kind of froze for a while and said, okay, let's go look at a medical book, and you point out what part of that book says what you're saying is true. And she finally came around to the idea that her dad was full of crap. And our parents, to a large extent, were full of crap. As we were growing up, a lot of things we know now we didn't know back then. None of us are perfect, and all of us have information that is simply untrue. And the more we do on our own to discover where we've been misled, the more able we are to make decisions on our own life that are accurate. Let's put something else. I'm a firm belief there are a whole lot of people out there that should never get married. Absolutely should never get married. Yet they're told incessantly that if they don't get a spouse and have children, that they're somehow less of a human. You're not. The thing is you are your own person. You are responsible for your own happiness and future. Nobody else is going to hold your hand your entire life to do it. Your parents may try to do that, but the sooner you take control over your own life, the sooner you decide what it is you want out of that life, the sooner you'll find a path to getting to where it is you eventually will want to go. But it's all about understanding the facts, understanding reality, and understanding the process of going through and challenging your beliefs. I mentioned that CEO that believed that flies sing. They don't, by the way. But there's so much of that stuff that's out there that just people fundamentally believe is the case. Here in the United States, the political system is being messed up by the belief that one party is made up of all pedophiles. But I don't even know how you sustain a belief like that. Yet it's widespread, it's deeply rooted, and it's held by a large number of people. But just because a large number of people believe something like the world is flat doesn't mean it's true. Oh, one of the other stories, speaking of the world is flat, I was watching a couple argue why the world is flat and saying that, well, the reason I believe the world is flat is because there was a fisherman in my town. He went out and he sailed toward Canada and he never came back. And I believe he went off the edge of the world. Really, that's your entire logic tree, and that forms the basis of their belief that the world is flat, and they would not be swayed from that fundamental belief. Now, most of you out there are saying, well, we don't believe the world's flat, but I'm willing to bet you every person within range of my voice believes something that they think is absolutely true that is absolutely not. And if you can discover that yourself and understand how that mistake was made and then deprogram yourself from those false beliefs, you're going to be in much better shape to understand the things that you need to do to make your life better and to survive the changing world that Sharif pointed out when he asked the question. When you're trying to weave through a complex situation, you have to get to the truth. And if you can't understand what is true and what is not true, you'll never get there. The most important skill I ever learned was critical thinking, being able to challenge things that people said that looked a little squirrely, and instead of just accepting them as fact and moving on. I'll give you one final example of a really pretty sad story in my own case. My great uncle, who I admired greatly, he was the top justice in the Superior Court of Orange County, California, and he was training me to be an attorney. And you'll notice I'm not an attorney. So but pretty much assume that it didn't go well. He was also very religious. His wife had been critically ill, and he prayed for her health and said that if she survived, that he would be a believer. And so in exchange for my training in law, I agreed to let him preach religion to me. And then one day after a session, he was talking to me about this, how critical thinking can get you in trouble, sort of. The session was on Satan and how Satan was the great deceiver. And I had to be very careful about my behavior because I could be led down a bad path. I think that kind of lesson is good, just recognizing that you can be misled even though you're applying religion. But since we just finished a structure on litigation, I said, well, but if Satan's the great deceiver, wouldn't the greatest deception be if Jesus were Satan? I was done. I mean, the thing is, I was escorted out of his office, never to return again, because I challenged a fundamental belief that he had, and I'd done it in such a way, accidentally on my own part. I had no desire to end my education that soon, but I challenged a belief that he had that was irrefutable, that was unbudgeable. And the end result, and he regretted this for that on his last day, he regretted that he had never seen me again, because he recognized that what he had done was wrong. He had a kid that admired the hell out of him, that he was helping grow, and he turned off that entire process because I'd accidentally said something he couldn't tolerate. Understanding your beliefs, understanding your gore points, understanding who you are is critical to moving forward. Whether it's your digital identity or your real identity, the two should be in concert, and you should have a deep understanding of what they are.
Thank you for your excellent analysis, Professor David Smith.
Fantastic discussion. And Rob's helped challenge a bunch of my beliefs. No, not really. This topic has so many different segments to it. No one has mentioned yet the technology in the healthcare area that changes your personal identity. I can today go and instead of grow my hair back, I can have hair clinically inserted, and I can have a new head of hair. I can go and get plastic surgery done and change my appearance. I can go and do other procedures to increase my strength, to increase my endurance, and a lot of other things like that. That is actually technology, healthcare technology, changing your personal identity. And you see that happen way too often today, where a lot of non-medical necessity procedures are done to help alter your personal identity. And I think that's a very important element here. One of the other things that I think that is happening there is we have changed a lot of how we view ourselves. And Donald, the internal external view of ourselves was actually out of some of the psychology courses that I have taken over the years, and some of the briefs on that. And in psychology, they view your immediate circle of influence as internal. Things outside of that circle of influence, they view as external. And over time, that internal view has either shrunk or gotten bigger depending on the individual. But it's, to me, what's happening is kind of like the old adage about the frog. And there's two really very sad things about the unintended consequences of the emerging technology and how it's affecting our identity. First, most people have no idea of the dramatic changes that are occurring slowly, yet really pushing them ahead. You know, it's kind of like when you put the frog in a pot of water on the stove and gradually turn the heat up until it boils. In many ways, that's how we as individuals have taken this use of technology to dramatically changing our view of our personal identity. It's been slow. And we get more used to it, just as the frog gets more used to the warmer and warmer water. So technology has forced us into this dramatic change of it. But secondly, the shift of where we set our self-worth has also been a slow but very dramatic change. And that self-worth is one that technology has been part of the heating that water up. And our self-worth as well as our self-identity have both shifted where it is. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, as I started this segment here talking about the enhancements to our physical appearance, our enhancements to our physical capabilities, have all been things that have helped us change not only our identity, but our self-worth, and how that has impacted us. Would I want to take this technology away? No, I really would not want to take it away. There's so many good consequences that go with the bad consequences. But I really think we have to look at new ways to put some governance around what we're doing, and new ways to understand that this change has taken place. I can tell you, talking to my son's friends, they have no idea that this change has taken place, because it's what they have seen as they've grown up. And they do not know what it was like without technology. I mean, when I told them, gee, when I was born, we didn't have a TV set. My first TV set was black and white. And for my grandparents, I was the remote control. Go turn it off, change the channel, change the value. And then I was the remote control, and they went, what? No, can't be. So we see technology and the concept where we've grown up. And the current generations see their identity in a very far different way than most of us on the panel today. And I think that is one that we have to understand. I think we have to look at the governance around that. I think we have to look at the education around that. And really come to grasp this as a multi-generational problem too. And I think that's for this one where I think I probably should stop.
Thank you. Professor Donald.
Well, as usual, everyone has been making such great comments and statements that I really enjoy listening to them. One of the things that several people said supports what I was probably ineffectively trying to say, which is that part of our identity, or a lot of our identity, comes from the people around us. And whether or not, I mean, sociologists think of it a little different than psychologists, but what David said and I'm saying really isn't extremely different. It's just labels for things. And so when Rob was talking about the problems that we have of people, anti-vaxxers, for an instance, studies are showing that when you get somebody that's a global warming denier or anti-vaxxer and things like that, it's got a lot more to do with the relationships that they have with people and what they say that makes them feel good. In other words, you're around people, the people that you're around, you say things to them. You have we're pack animals. If you start getting rejected from your pack, that sets off your flight and fight response, and you modify it. You try and say the same things that are going to get you the kind of feedback that you want, that's going to make you feel good. And so what winds up happening is if somebody says something that's different, very different than what it is, even if it's a fact, we have a tendency to reject it because we are an anti-vaxxer, we are a Republican, we are whatever we happen to be. And I really love what Rob said. I know one of the things that the right-wing media loves to get on about is how kids are indoctrinated in school. And I have a friend who's a Stanford professor, and he was nice enough to let me audit his courses. And right from day one, he's a very well-known sociology professor, and right from day one, he basically tells the students, don't believe anything I say. Just, here is how to check what I'm saying. Here's things to read. Here's ways to verify for yourself that what I'm saying is probably true. You'll never know anything's completely true. There's no way. And it's interesting when we're talking about digital presence or our digital identities, and there's recommendations that, we be careful, and I definitely agree with that. However, I've noticed over time that just as everyone's been saying that these changes are gradual, like David's metaphor of boiling the frog. If the water's hot and you throw a frog in it, it jumps right out. But if you heat the water slowly, it gets up to boiling and the frog doesn't know it, and you have frog legs. They especially appreciate this metaphor in France. What I tend to wonder if we get the people in the next generation who've grown up in that really digital thing. I mean, right now, business, the hierarchy of business is dominated by people who are, a little older. That people will just look at that and go, well, I did the same thing. I mean, it gives a rat's ass what somebody did online when they were 12 years old. But what's really funny about it and is really interesting is that I was on Twitter, and I made this joke about Trump. And the joke was, I said, if he wouldn't get out of office, if he wouldn't leave the office, we could call animal control, have him darted, and knock him out, drag him out of the office, which is what they do if a mountain lion got in your office or something like that. And the Trump fans saw that and got so upset that they made hundreds of complaints about it. They get together and they do that. And I got kicked off of Twitter. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to go back on Twitter, but I created a new identity for myself. And I've been very careful about the way I use this identity. It's actually, I used a face morphing program and morphed my face to a younger version of myself. So I didn't have to steal somebody else's image. I just did that. And now I've just crossed, I had 800 followers before, and now I have 4,300 followers, and it's growing rapidly. So I think that's kind of interesting that you can create an identity if you want to. Now, I want to go and talk about something James said, and I take a, and I know James says too, I take a very broad view of what spirituality can mean, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you belong to a church or anything else like that, or even believe in God. And I go back to the great philosophers of ancient Greece, and there was a philosophy called Stoicism, and one of the top, most famous people, and it was a guy named Epictetus. And he said basically that you need in life to be able to address the things that you can change. It's the AA prayer really came from that. You address the things that you can change and try and change them, and just let everything go that you have no control or influence over. And one of the things he listed as something that you don't have control or influence over is your reputation. So we work hard trying to manage our reputations. And I think that Epictetus's advice is good. And that's why I'm not afraid of what I post on Facebook, because I try and post things that are intelligent, informative. Occasionally I get mad and say things, but I don't get in long fights with people or anything else like that. And then I always back down. And why is that? It's because of my integrity, my own sense of worth. What I have control over whether I'm honest or not. I have control over whether I work hard or not. I have control over whether I dedicate myself to learning and read. I'm reading a book a week right now. All of those things I have control over. I don't really have control over what other people think of me, because it's in their heads. I can't control other people. So what I think, when you're looking at your own personal identity, it's as we say, we get these scraps of stuff from this and that and the other thing. But one of the things that I'd recommend is, as part of having integrity, is a lot of skepticism about what other people tell you. In fact, don't believe what I'm saying. I mean, go out and spend some time yourself. Read Epictetus. Make sure that I said the right thing about it. Look at the Stoics. Find out about the Stoics. Create an identity for yourself on Twitter and play around and see if you can see how people react to things that you say. All of the things that I'm saying, you can learn yourself. And when you do, you're investing in yourself, and how other people think of you is, that's them. But if you act with integrity, you're honest, you work hard, you contribute to society, and you do all these kinds of things, it's going to fall into place. People are going to think well of you.
Thank you, Mr. Jamsid.
Thank you, Sharif. I so enjoy these types of discussions. Talking about identity, as a chess player, I would move to different cities, either the job transfer or a woman would kick me out of my own apartment. Can you believe that? And I would end up living in a new place. I would go to the nearest chess club. And when I would walk in, the first thing they would ask me is, what's your rating? They wouldn't ask me what's your name. They wouldn't say, how you doing? They would say, what's your rating? Because that's how chess players identified each other. So, we can have this false sense of precision based on a number. But I want to reinforce what Rob initially said, control your digital identity. This is very important. Otherwise, the consequences could be dire in your life. Your identity could be stolen. It could be misused, misrepresented. It could be a lot of things unless you take control. So you observe if it's being misused. So this is very important to the modern day society, modern day living. But I want to double down on the idea that that Donald was talking about, it doesn't matter to me what other people think of me. It's what I think of myself. So my identity is an inside job. I know that I'm more than my rating, you know, and when I was a teenager, you know, my rating was pretty much me. And I had so much of my own identity wrapped up with that, you know, and I had a good tournament. I felt good about myself. I've had a bad tournament. I felt bad about myself. You know, this is not the way to live a happy life, a productive life. So I think that what is your identity? You know, what are you passionate about? Because passion and identity are wrapped up. You know, are you passionate about something? Is it building stuff? Well, that's part of your identity. You know, is it creating stuff on with paint, artists, models, sculpturing? You know, are you passionate about that? Is that what you want to do? Well, that's part of your identity. These are clues. Then you can be a person like me who's curious about all sorts of things. And I just, you know, have a harder time figuring out what's the core me, because, you know, it could be this on Thursday and that on Saturday. And, you know, and one of the things that I've just because I have never done it before, I've been studying the Gita. And, you know, one of the things in the Gita, Krishna says is, you know, the environment is stronger than any individual. So if your environment is such where there's a lot of negativity around, escape it if you can. If there's an environment that you feel comfortable with, connected to the other people, stay there if you can. You know, because this will shape who you are. And I know this because I was born in New Haven, Connecticut, and I grew up a Yankee fan. But I used to go into Fenway Park and sit in the bleachers with my Yankees gear and have the Red Sox fans throw beer at me. But by the end of the game, you know, we were all laughing and talking to each other because I knew all the stats and I appreciated baseball more than I appreciated teams. And so I could talk their language. I knew as much about their players as they did. And then I came out to California and I lived in Oakland, and I would go to a place and there was a bunch of Oakland A's fans. So I could talk like an Oakland A's fan. And then they accepted me and I was part of the group. And then, you know, I moved to San Francisco and I was a Giants fan, but not really. I was being inauthentic. And in all those cases, I had to go back to where I was wearing Yankees gear in the Boston Fenway Park. And that was the true me. So now I'm a Yankees fan, even if I'm around a bunch of Oakland A's fans. I'm a Yankees fan, even if I'm around a bunch of San Francisco Giants fans. You know, you got to find out who you really are and be that person, be authentic to that person. And don't let the environment influence you to be someone you are not. Now, but the environment is stronger than any individual. So what are you going to do? Well, find the environment that works for you, that is consistent with your identity, with who you really are. And then you will lead a happy, productive life. Now, some of us have no choice. But if you do have a choice, find that environment. If you want to be an artist, find other artists. Learn from other artists. If you want to be an engineer, find other engineers, learn from them. If you want to be a mathematician, find other mathematicians, learn from them. You know, this is the type of thing. This is not separating yourself. This is following your passion, finding out your core identity, and then sticking to it, being authentic about your identity. And this is a life lesson that I had to learn the hard way. I was stubborn, and I was not able to identify what I really believed for quite some time. So if it's not obvious to you, don't give up. It wasn't obvious to me. Some people, they're born obvious. They just know right from the beginning, from the get-go, what they want to be. You know, the world's filled with different people. And I found that when I spent time trying to correct others in the way they thought, because not everybody reasons as cogently as I prefer, and so I would try to correct their logic. That led to conflict. And now when I can accept people as they are, it leads to peace. Do you want a world of conflict or a world of peace? And I think most of us would choose the world of peace. So we have to learn to accept others, even if they're different from us, even if their passions are other than our own. And we could get along? Why can't we all just get along? Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron.
Yeah, so absolutely brilliant, James, first of all. Secondly, I think in a way, technology is sort of helping us find our humanity. You think about, technology literally having pulled mankind from the most barbaric of dark ages to where we are now. And bringing us together, what James said about finding other people with similar interests like you, breaking your cycle and getting out to what actually interests you and meeting with people who are into that. The internet is so powerful for that. And I say that personally, because since I've taken up coding, being able to find and have access to millions of other people who are far more adept than I will probably ever be at coding, and being able to interact with them and incorporate their knowledge all over the internet. And you can apply this to anything that interests you, essentially. And sometimes there may be paywalls behind these communities as well if they're very intellectual communities. So, obviously be prepared for that. But this also helps you to shape your identity in ways that we haven't had the power to do before. There is another hand to this all. And this kind of goes back hand in hand with manifesting yourself. Once you figure out what you are passionate about, what you do wake up excited about in the morning, and you begin to pursue these avidly, and you're genuinely interested in them, and you're genuinely putting in work in them, well, create pages based on your online identity, based on your identity that revolve around those hobbies. If you're taking up coding, start a blog to document your progress, start a YouTube channel to document your progress, and just upload footage of you coding or whatever it is that you're interested about. And this becomes part of your identity, and this is part of how you manifest yourself. Also, there are ways to scrub large parts of your internet history. You can actually pay Google to remove certain results. If you contact most companies and ask for your information and be removed, they will do it. There are agencies that you can hire to do this in your stead. I don't know the names of any specific ones. I haven't needed to do that to any great extent, thankfully. But there are ways for you to clean up your history, go start pursuing what you're passionate about, start documenting that, and building a true identity for yourself based around that. And honestly, you could very easily become very wealthy and very well known by just doing this and being genuine. There are people who have been able to quit their dead-end jobs after investing a few years in building something like this. So, because if you are genuine and you're truly genuine about your interests and you're passionate about them and you're documenting them, people are going to take interest in that, because you're not just another automaton, not another brick in the wall, as James would say. You kind of stick out a little bit more because you're expressing yourself in a unique and authentic way. And in today's consumerist culture, that is perhaps the most marketably viable thing you could do, is to actually come down to your root and figure yourself out, figure out what you're passionate about, and begin to create communities for yourself around that and immerse yourself in these communities. And that's going to be what integrates and creates this change, is people using the internet like that, and using technology like that. That's what's going to help us preserve. And again, not even just preserve. I don't think technology is destroying humanity. I think that technology is a defining factor of humanity. And I think that we are inherently the sole, as far as we know, defining factor of technology as a species. So really, it's up to us to use it this way, because these effects are going to, and I hate using trickle-down ideology, but these effects are going to trickle down and create positive changes for our environments. You have no idea the connections that would be made if people, watching this show take these ideas and go start pursuing their own communities and doing things like that. So anyways, sorry for the caffeine-fueled tangent, but thank you for the time.
Thank you. This is really, really great discussion, and I'm sure that we can identify ourselves, identify in a better way. So now I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Beside that World Talent Economy Forum, we are doing some sort of fundraising. So you can support our initiative. As well as we are developing our board of advisors as well, and our ambassador panel. So hopefully we can create more interesting products and services for our uh, uh, Asia Pacific communities, and especially we do focus on research, coaching, and consulting. So any organization has any kind of idea and thought you want to share with us, you can share with us, and we definitely, our speakers, our panelists, they're going to help you to solve your problem. So I want to start from Professor Rob for this concluding remark. Professor Rob, yeah.
Sorry, the microphone had dropped off the bottom of my screen. Couldn't find it. All right, so we talked about the importance of really understanding who you are. I mean, as you're developing your own digital identity, you kind of have to have an understanding of who you are, what it is you stand for, what it is that's important to you, and recognize that we all put on a mask. We for most of us, we don't have a view that if people knew who we really were, they wouldn't like us. And I think that kind of goes to the core of why so many relationships fail. It's that false appearance we put forward, that fake persona that we try to create because we're trying to please others, that falls apart once you've known people for a long period of time, or particularly get into a romantic relationship. And if you can't maintain honesty and integrity with the people you're closest to, those relationships probably won't be very deep, and they certainly won't last. And as you get older, as you advance in your careers and your life, it's those relationships that are going to help sustain you. That's probably going to be where you derive an awful lot of your happiness. And if you've not learned to be honest and accurate with how you portray yourself, then your ability to have that happy life will be dramatically reduced. Recognize what it is you want to be right now in the future. How do you want to look back at your life? You'll eventually be where a lot of us are on our winter days as opposed to our spring days, and you'll be looking back at the things that you've done, and like a lot of us, probably have a lot of things you just did not remember. The more you think through that now, the less you're going to have the problem I just mentioned in the future. And so in the end, understand your digital identity is how people perceive you. It should accurately reflect who you are, and it should force a certain amount of introspection to decide if how you're perceived and how you act is really how you want to be. And if it's not, change it. There was some mention of whether you have a choice or not. You always have a choice. Even if it's a very difficult choice, you always have a choice. And the way to figure out whether the choice is going to be good or not is just figure out what your life's going to be in 10 years if you don't, or if you do make that choice. A lot of the decisions we make these days are tactical, but they have strategic implications. And if you can learn to think through the long-term implications of what it is you're doing, you'll have a better chance of not having those things come back and haunt you in the future, where you dread them showing up in an interview, or dread having them show up on a dating app. I married my wife through a predecessor to online dating, Great Expectations, which is a video dating service, and in the end, it was really because of almost an accident that we ended up together, because we saw each other as the way we were, not necessarily the way we portrayed ourselves on that particular application. And I think it made all the difference in the world, and it was an accident. I'm suggesting you do that on purpose. But in any case, I hope you have an absolute wonderful future. We didn't nearly get to my digital immortality thing, perhaps in a different session in the future. But I wish you all the best of luck going forward. And thanks again, Sharif, for having me.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, I love the discussion. This is a fantastic topic. And I, for one, am very glad that when I was in high school and my first go through college, I did not have social media, because I did some things that I surely wouldn't want to show up today. And so we see those, but even there, we see instances where people go back and pull things up. When I was being vetted to work for some of my companies I've done work for in the past. They even went back and talked to my high school teachers. They went back and talked to an elementary school teacher. They talked to friends of mine in Brazil, in Japan, and other places to see if I was an okay guy. So our identities are widespread even without the digitalization of our identity. Another thing that recently struck me is we're getting ready for one of my high school reunions, and people took pictures of me in the yearbook and they ran them through facial recognition programs. And boy, they found some pictures and things on the net that I didn't know was out there. And so we see even that unintended consequence coming up. But I'm going to get a little philosophical here a minute. Remember the Delphi Oracle, and if you remember the Delphi's guidance, it was know thyself. Well, I think today in the world of social media networks, the Oracle advice might be show thyself. And I say that more than tongue in cheek, because it really has changed to, as Rob and others have said, it's how we manage our outward image, our outward identity, that in sometimes is as important as our internal identity and our thoughts there. And the Oracle was in a different time. But, we really come to see our identities as we want people to see them. And we feel compelled to market and promote these identities. And really the line between us as a person and our personification, our private and public self, become blurred. And this self-identity, self-worth has changed. From our program earlier in the week, a longer lifespan changes the way that people see their self-identity. With me thinking that technology will provide us enhancements to our lifespan, I personally feel like I'm probably 20 years younger, 25 years younger than I am, because of all the advancements and things. And that affects my personal identity. I actually love to ask people how old they think I am. And invariably, they choose 10 to 15 years younger than I actually am as part of their answer. And that has become part of my psyche, part of my personal identity too, as we look at this, as we begin to age and get older. New technologies really affect the needs differently. I love the people who have no interest in social media. I love the people who do not watch any television of any type. I love the people who say, let me go into the wilderness and decide what I want to do and detach from society for a while. The old adage, could you live in this log cabin on this lake with no internet access? That would kill some of us. And others, it would be a great respect to do it. But let's look at that one on the other side. The access to this digital technology has taken me personally and broadened me. If you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, you see I post things about a very broad path of different technologies, a very broad path of different things like that. The social digital media, the access to information, the ability to do rapid research has changed my self-identity with that. No longer do I think I have to be specialized with walls built around me. And I think we're going to see that more and more as we look at new identity there. And as several have mentioned, we need to look at the ways to rehabilitate our identity because of the complexity of the systems. But, humanity has been evolving for thousands of years. very slowly, or in some cases very frenetically over the last couple of centuries. You know, I'm really convinced that we have a bright future opening up with the application of technology, as long as we face the challenges. You know, one of the things I mentioned earlier, I want to just kind of close with this, is we need to modernize our governance structure from local to global to international. You know, we are really using governance structures that are rusty, that ignore the complexity of reality, and really have tremendous differences in preparing the necessary strategies and actions that are necessary. And many have a short-term view rather than a long-term view. And the threats and challenges to our personal identity, though, are really not technology problems. They're political problems. They're societal problems. And technology is the tool we use to go and work through those. I really think we live in the best of worlds and in the worst of worlds when it comes to personal identity. Thank you again for another great session.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor David. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks? Professor Donald.
I want to reiterate what I was saying is a lot of our identity is created by our relationships. When James was saying that he was a rebel, you have to have somebody to rebel against. It's not, you can't be a rebel by yourself. And I know I was there. I was part of the anti-war movement. I was at the BDC marches and all the good stuff. I was there. And, but we were together. That was part of the exciting part of it, is that we formed a group of people that were together. We were working together to try and straighten out a very, very big mistake that the United States had made. And so if you ask me about like who I was, part of who I was somebody that was trying to straighten out the big mistake that the United States made. Our identities are always tied up with other people. I really, really appreciate what James and others have been saying about the importance of your immediate networks and your immediate relationships. Because there's an old thing that if you want to be a millionaire, hang out with millionaires. If what I'm saying is true and our identity is formed by the people that are around us, well, then it goes without saying that being around people that are going to make us better, or at least what we consider better, or even you can read history, like I was saying, when you talk about Epictetus, the idea of what's better, you can learn some ideas about what kinds of things work for people. And and I've said this so many times before, that if you want to be a good software engineer, don't move to Des Moines, or I don't know, in the broader world, I'm sure don't move to Mecca, whatever. Move to a place where there's software engineers. Move to Silicon Valley. Move to Austin or New York or someplace, or Aquila, Paris actually has a great software industry. So there's places all over the world that you can go to. If you want to be into fashion, move to Milan, move to New York. There's whatever it is that you want to be, you can't be that without the knowledge of other people around you. I mean, you don't get to say you're creative. I mean, you can. I used to know this guy who smoked pot all day long, and he sat in a chair chuckling to himself. And I said, well, what are you doing? He says, I'm being creative. And I thought, well, I could just do random things all day long, and by accident, I would do something that other people might think is creative, but you'll never do anything creative, because no matter how creative he thinks he is. So it's your relationships with other people. And I think that goes leads into the thing about digital is the net can be a fabulous place. I mean, the social media, you can find people who are very, very intelligent. It's like I live in a town right now where there's no kind of place where people hang out. So I have a great deal of difficulty finding someone who can talk about the subjects that I'm interested in because they're advanced. And so my balm is connections that I've made on social media where I can write stuff and people will come back and make intelligent comments on it and we can have intelligent discussions, and that's wonderful for me. The other side to it is that part of the internet has become a sewer where people 8chan and things like that, where people just get together. That's QAnon is a phenomena that was basically born of these networks. So it's the exact same thing. If you want to become a lunatic conspiracy theorist, hang out with lunatic conspiracy theorists, and that's something you need to be careful about. And so I'm going to end with saying that the digital opportunity is wide. It's besides the social networks that you have, you can expand your mind and make yourself a better person by learning. Like now, if you take my formula and say doubt everything, now people tell me things and they give me facts, and I immediately go and I check. I say, is this person bullshitting me or not? And I'm going to read a very short thing that's attributed to Mark Twain. And I didn't have time to check and see if he really said it. So don't believe he actually said it. It's attributed to him. Almost everything you read that's attributed to Mark Twain and Einstein are actually not things that Einstein or Mark Twain said. But this one is, it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that ain't so. And I think that we have the ability to go and check and look at things. And it's a matter of, to me, if I find out I'm wrong, I'm very, very happy because I know I've learned something. I don't search around for things that I know are right. I search around for things to find out if things are true or not. Because I have friends that are just unbelievably high-level professors and things like that. And long ago, I would repeat something that I'd heard from somebody else that wasn't true, and they'd like just kind of laugh at me and go, "Well, where did you get that?" And I would be so embarrassed. So for self-protection, I've started looking stuff up to make sure that I'm actually, and that's an incredible, beautiful thing about the internet and what we have available to us. So you have the ability to get in discussions with people who will help you grow. You have an ability to get into double check things and actually take a skeptical view of the world. And so I think that I agree with David. It is a beautiful time in a lot of ways. I mean, when I was before the internet, you'd sit there and you'd go, "Well, is so and so still alive?" And you would have no way of knowing. If you didn't remember, how would you find out? Now you can just look it up and find out when and if they died and what they died of and where they died and everything else. I mean, all of this is available to you if you learn to use it. And all of the things all of the stories that you use get in your head are the things that you can use to create who you are. And but again, as everyone's been saying, what I was saying about not trying to manage your reputation, well, I mean, that's not, I mean, I understand what people are saying about, not posting you, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't mind posting what I did posting in high school and college, because I would be smart enough not to post anything I did that was illegal. which was considerable actually. And and so, don't be stupid, but just like a relationship with a person, you're having a relationship with other people. And, look to have integrity, to be honest, to be hardworking, to be sincere, to learn, all those kinds of things. And then the other parts, you don't have to do anything. And that's all you need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Jamsid.
Thank you, Sharif, for another wonderful opportunity to spend time talking about something that just is fascinating to me. Just picking up on what Donald said, I was amazed to watch Donald Trump yesterday, admitting to his organization's wrongdoing, and his defense was, "Who knew?" Ignorance is no defense. Sorry, but the idea here that we want to reach out. Stick on is your "to thine own self be true." We talked about the oracle, know thyself. William Shakespeare talked about "to thy own self be true." And this is wonderful advice. How do you figure out what that means? For me, it was a lot of trial and error. So don't be afraid of change, because I have gone through a lot of change. And I've learned yesterday, I would say I'm not old, but I've just divided a lot. I think that was the thing. My cells have divided quite a bit. So, I have had this experience, and I have complete confidence that others will. Sometimes it's very clear, it's intuitively obvious what your identity is. Sometimes it's not, and you must try. And it's a trial and error. Try things out, see if it works. See if you become passionate about it. Then you will know. No one will have to tell you. You will know, this is me, because it resonates. And if it doesn't resonate, then it's not who you really are. But if it resonates deep down within you, that is who you are. So these are the things you have to be open. You have to be willing to change. And the latest things I talked about, I wanted to explore spirituality because that was not what I had done. I had explored things about zeros and ones in the wrong combination don't do what you want them to do, but zeros and ones in the right combination will do what you want them to do. And I was good at getting them and doing in the right order so that they do what other people wanted them to do. And, and then there was old systems and new systems, and they couldn't talk to each other. And I was good at figuring out how to get them to talk to each other. And so I made a living. I got a shelter from the storm. Food and water were not a problem for me, but I had to be willing to change. I changed my careers multiple times, and I had to be willing to learn. So I was always open to learning. And the last thing that I got, I just certified in healing energy by Reiki, which is a Japanese phenomenon. I got spent hours in group studies on Buddhism, and then I recently, the last 2 years, been studying the Gita. I've taken courses online, about over 60 hours worth of courses with people who have mastered these subjects, and I've learned from them. I've learned a great deal. So, this is all about being open to trying it. So I don't care if your spiritual leader is an imam, a guru, a rabbi. It doesn't matter to me. Just find something that resonates with you, because it's not just our bodies, but it's also our minds and our spiritual well-being that we have to focus on. That's not just one or two of the three. All three is who we really are. These are the things that I think are lifelong journeys that we're all on. And so don't be discouraged if you don't know when you're young exactly who you are. That's okay. It's part of life. Keep going, though. Keep finding. Don't be shy about learning new things. Don't be shy about changing yourself. Don't be shy about doing something that you used to be against, because my eyes have been opened very often in my life where I've strongly believed in a certain thing only to find out that it wasn't the truth. And gosh, doggone it, the government was lying to us about the Vietnam War. Holy cow. Before I knew that, I thought they were telling us the truth. I thought we were winning the Vietnam War because Walter Cronkite was putting a body count on TV every night, and there were more of them dying than us. So I thought we were winning. Was I young? Yes. Was I uninformed? Yes. And so what did I do? I informed myself, and I realized that not everybody tells you the truth. Sometimes they're not trying to inform you; they're trying to persuade you. Gosh! So then I became untrusting. Well, now I've gotten to the point in my life where trust is available now. But, Reagan said, trust but verify. Make sure you know that what they're telling you is true. So don't accept it on its face. Figure it out. Check that source. Did Mark Twain really say that? The chances are maybe, maybe not. So find out. Do your own research. Do your own double checking on the information that's being told to you. Is it told to you to persuade you, or is it told you to inform you? And be open to the information once you've verified that it is actually information, that it is real, not the product of someone's understanding. And the confirmation bias that they have has produced what they are telling you is data and statistics, but it's not information. It's not the truth. So these are lifelong processes. We get better at it as we keep doing it. And don't be willing to stop. Don't get stuck at any point in your life. Keep changing, keep being open to change, keep learning, keep educating yourself. Don't wait to be taught, teach yourself. And there's plenty of resources for doing this in this modern age. But the one final thing I want to leave us with is the technology and identity is who's controlling the technology. And will they influence us? Because this is the question of whether or not we are free to choose. That can be taken away from us. We live in a free society, so yeah, we can change our environment. But if you're living in a totalitarian regime, you don't have that choice. You're stuck. And you can't go beyond a certain parameter that they define that you don't. So, don't let the technology become used by a totalitarian mindset of people who want to control your lives, because today they can. They have the technology to do it. So err on the side of freedom and being able to live your life as you choose to live it. And you won't go far wrong. Thank you, Sharif. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. It's really, really great session for us, especially for the young community. They can learn a lot what they have to do in the future and how they can identify themselves. So a lot of good things happening in this show. Thank you for joining today's session. Thank you, Professor Rob, Professor Donalds, Professor David, and James to joining in this session. It's really great session for us. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.